Okay, so I'm Ellie Grace, as Finn mentioned, and I'm mostly famous for being a folk musician.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you knew about that.
Yeah.
But I have a website and everything. So I started being a folk musician when I was really young, which is what happens when you grow up in a family band. But that's for my therapist, not for you guys. So all the way through my childhood and high school and into college, I was touring as a folk musician, which is not your normal upbringing. So that was an adventure, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. When I finished college, I continued being a folk musician, and I got to a point where I was like, I've been a folk musician my whole life. I was having my sort of career crisis, and I was probably like, 22 or something. But I had been on the same career path since I was 5. So I decided that I wanted to try something new. And what sounded most appealing to me was being a ranger. So mostly for the uniform, but I love nature too. So, but I was really excited about the uniform. So I set about finding a place to be a ranger. And through this organization called the SCA, not the one where they do reenactments of, Society for Community Anachronism, it wasn't that. It was a Student Conservation Association. So I sent out applications to a bunch of national parks, and my top 2 choices were the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and Rocky Mountain National Park. And I was mostly intending to go to Rocky Mountain National Park, but I was open to other ideas. I lived in Missouri at this time, and I loved both sets of mountains. Maybe not equally at that time, but I won't tell you which one I loved more then, because I love the other one more now. I love this one more now, in case you're wondering. So I sent out all these applications, and I heard back from Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And they wanted me to come for the fall and be a ranger, an interpretive ranger. I, of course, had visions of hiking in the woods and carrying out injured people and wrangling bears, and apparently that's not exactly what you do as a ranger. So I talked to them, and they mostly wanted me because I was a musician. And I was like, but I'm looking for a different adventure. So they were like, okay, if you play music once a week, we'll let you play ranger for the rest of the week. So I went to Cades Cove at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is the most visited place in the most visited national park in the country. And it was beautiful. I got to live in the park, and I got to wear a walkie-talkie, a big one. It wasn't even just, I had like the thing that clipped onto my thing, so I could like not even take off my walkie-talkie. I could just be like, yeah, there's a tree. I got it under control though, don't worry. So Cades Cove is a historical site. Primarily it's preserving a way of life that maybe from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it was a loop. So has anybody been there?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so there's a loop road. It's 11 miles long, and it's one way. Lots of people bike it, but most people drive it. And all along the way there are cabins where you can find out about John... Well, I can't remember their names. Anyway, some guys who lived there and did things. And I told people about that. So my primary job was doing sort of historical interpretation. There was a visitor center and an old mill, and we did programs about how people used everything, and toothbrushes were made out of sticks and all that exciting stuff. But what most people came there for was to see wildlife. Most specifically, they wanted to see bears. And I was there in the fall, so this was big wildlife season and big leaf peeper season. And people got very excited about the wildlife, which I understand. I was very excited too. But they went a little overboard in that if they saw any kind of wildlife, they got very excited, even a squirrel, which I'm sure they were seeing in their normal life, but somehow a Great Smoky Mountains National Park squirrel they had to take a picture of. So this brought up an issue, which was that on a one-way road that lots and lots and lots of people were visiting who were really excited about seeing wildlife, if they saw wildlife, they kind of lost their sense of what was a good idea and what was a bad idea. The first thing they would do is that they would stop their car in the middle of the road. And because it was a one-way road and one lane, this would lead to long traffic jams, especially when they would stop their car if they thought they saw something, like maybe it was a log, but they were pretty sure it was a bear. So they would get out of their car, and they would all just abandon their cars. And then, if it really was a bear, they would like start running towards the bear, which is a really bad idea. So we had a special code on our radios that I had with my uniform, and for what we called a bear jam or a deer jam. So, and we would all, if we heard the code call over the radio, we would all rush to the location of the bear jam, because people could be stuck for hours. These jams would be miles long, because when there's a bear, people can't think. So we would go and we'd put on our red vests, and we would tell people not to run after the bear, and we would tell people either pull to the side of the road or keep moving. And so this was a big excitement around Cades Cove, was the bear jam or the deer jam. And one time, we always heard reports. So I had one time when I was working up at the Wildlife Overlook, and I had animal skins, and I was talking to people about the coyotes and the wolves and the bears, and how a bear can smell a hamburger from a mile away, and all these cool things. When we started, this was a few miles into the loop, and we started getting reports of a bear sighting earlier in the loop. People were coming along and being like, there was a bear, there was a bear. And they were very excited, but it seemed like there was some confusion about what the story was. We kept getting different stories. Some of the law enforcement officers were starting to come out. Yeah, it turns out the law enforcement rangers were the ones who did the carrying people out and wrangling things. So, not me. Anyway, so we started getting all these reports of this bear. And the reports got more and more interesting as people sort of filtered into the Wildlife Overlook. And we finally got the full story. It turns out there was a bear jam. We were starting to hear there was a bear jam over the radio. Law enforcement was starting to go out there. I was not in a place in the loop where I could get to it, because it would take a long time to get around, so they had to save the day without me. But what we started hearing about was that there was, in fact, a bear, and that people were losing their mind, and they were they were flooding out of their cars, going into the woods after this bear. They were sure they saw a bear, and they were all like, there were cars everywhere, there were people everywhere going after this bear that they saw. And they got closer and closer to the bear. And again, not a good idea for the bear or for the people. And it was a very large group at this point, closing in on this bear. And as they kind of came to a standstill, within very good photographing distance of the bear started running towards them, charging after all of them. And they started running to their cars, and complete chaos and pandemonium, until they realized that it was not, in fact, a bear, but it was a guy who thought it would be really funny if he went out to Cades Cove and rented an ape suit and went out into the woods and walked around like he was a bear until he had gathered a big crowd, and then he could scare the living daylights out of them. And it worked very well. So I've heard the entirety of the story from one of the law enforcement officers who ended up escorting this young man out so he would stop terrorizing the visitors to Cades Cove. But without saying this to any of the public visitors, this particular law enforcement officer said to me that this was, in fact, something that he had dreamed about doing very frequently, and he was thrilled beyond belief, but that was off record, that this guy had given the visitors a little taste of maybe reality, even though it wasn't reality, and a little idea about that's maybe not such a good idea to run after bears, even if they turn out to be guys in monkey suits. So that was one of my many adventures as a ranger, and I'll tell you more later.